President Muhammadu Buhari has described the P&ID deal in which a UK court judgment of $9.6 billion was ruled against Nigeria as a scam taken too far. Nigeria's president at the UN General Assembly briefed world leaders about the deal and also called on world leaders to partner with Africa in the development of its skills and manpower for growth. He compared this to the economic relations between the US and the rest of Europe, through which the US helped pull countries like Japan out of poverty.
President Muhammadu Buhari's address was made to a General Assembly presided over by fellow Nigerian, Professor Tijani Muhammad Bande. In his address, which was brief and straight to the point, President Buhari addressed the issue of poor economic development in Africa, calling on leaders to replicate partnerships in Europe on the continent.
Current attempts to help develop Africa by industrial countries are uncoordinated and plainly incremental. We have the skills, the manpower, and the natural resources, but in many instances, we lack the capital. Hence my plea for industrial countries to take a long-term view of Africa. We request you to come and partner with us to develop the continent for the benefit of all.
He then identified poverty as one of the greatest challenges facing our world and an inspiration for criminality and insurgency, and shared Nigeria's efforts at curbing poverty through her social investment program.
No threat is more potent than poverty and exclusion. They are the foul source from which common criminality, insurgency, cross-border crimes, human trafficking, and its terrible consequences draw their inspiration. Nigeria has developed a national social investment program, a pro-poor scheme that targets the poorest and most vulnerable households in the country. Under this initiative, easy access to financial services are facilitated to traders, artisans, market women, and cooperative societies.
He also played up Nigeria's fight against corruption.
Organized criminal networks, often acting with impunity across international borders, present new challenges where only collective action can deliver genuine results. This is true in the battle against violent extremism, against trafficking in people and drugs, and against corruption and money laundering. The present Nigerian government is facing the challenges of corruption head-on. We are giving notice to international criminal groups by the vigorous prosecution of the P&ID scam attempting to cheat Nigeria of billions of dollars.
President Buhari concludes his speech by affirming Nigeria's commitment to international cooperation on peace, security, and the UN's universal virtue of rule of law. Amarachi Ubani, Channel Television News.
For more reactions on the president's speech at UNGA 74, we take a closer look at that. We have from our Abuja studios Dr. Oshinaga, a member of the APC Presidential Media Committee, and Mr. Majid Dahiru, Public Affairs Analyst. We'd like to thank you both for joining us. We have a very short time before we go on our break, but I'd like to ask the first question, and that is to you, Mr. Oshinaga, on the issue of corruption, where the president said that the present Nigerian government is facing the challenges of corruption head-on, giving notice to the international criminal groups by vigorous prosecution of P&ID scam attempting to cheat Nigeria of billions of dollars. What did the president mean by international criminal groups involving P&ID?
Well, let me first state that the president's delivery and presentation yesterday was wonderful in terms of the delivery and its composure. And it was a great day for Nigeria. That of the 4 VIPs sitting on the high table, 3 of them are Nigerians on the world stage. So it's a golden time for Nigeria on the world stage. As for corruption, we all know that no government since 1999 has fought corruption like this president, this government has done so. And the spectacular scam called P&ID, it's truly a challenge. And don't forget, it's not just a local crime. It's an international crime. It has international dimensions, and I'm sure that this government will get to the root of it, and Nigeria will be saved the calamity of throwing our wealth down the drain.
All right, we'll come to Mr. Majid Dahiru when we return after this break, staying with the president's speech at UNGA. Please join us again. Welcome back to the program, but first to our news in brief. President Buhari has ordered the redeployment of Mr. Festus Keyamo from the Ministry of Niger Delta to the Ministry of Labour as Minister of State for Labour and Productivity, while Senator Tayo Alasho-Adura would replace Mr. Keyamo as Minister of State for Ministry of Minister of Niger Delta Affairs. In a statement signed by the Secretary to the Government of the Federation, the redeployment takes place immediately with effect from September the 24th, 2019. Meanwhile, Mr. Keyamo has responded in his tweet that his redeployment by the president within 1 month of office is evidence of his versatility. Elsewhere, the Nigerian army is launching multiple military operations in a bid to stem the tide of insecurity across the country. The army would be launching Operation Ayem Akpatuma 2, Crocodile Smile 4, and Igwe K today at the army headquarters in Abuja. The Nigerian army had launched similar operations in the past with Operation Python Dance, Lafia Dole, and many others in a bid to fighting insecurity in the country. Or staying with the president's speech at UNGA, we've been talking with our guests who are joining us from Abuja, Dr. Oshinaga, a member of the APC Presidential Media Committee, and also Mr. Dahiru Majid, public affairs analyst. Mr. Dahiru, let me come to you, and that's also the question I asked earlier, Mr. Oshinaga, with regards to what the president meant by international criminal groups involving P&ID. Mr. Dahiru, if you can hear me, I'll take that question again.
I do speech as fit for purpose, because when you go on the world stage, it's not an arena to begin to talk about domestic policies or domestic affairs or programs of government such as social investment programs or your ongoing war on corruption. I would think that an arena such as United Nations General Assembly is a place for a leading African country like Nigeria to advance, the international interests of developing countries such as Nigeria in terms of advocating for a fairer international trade arrangement that allows for Nigeria to participate in global trade and earn, enough revenue to grow the wealth of our nation. Now, as to the meaning of what the president said about international criminal groups in reference to P&ID, yes, for as long as government continues to outsource its responsibilities of governance, P&ID will always happen. So it is not enough to simply reiterate, by way of rhetorics, the incursion into our economic space by international criminal groups. It is to put safeguards, adequate safeguards in place internally to prevent such. And this will be for government to begin to take the business of governance very seriously and reform its own public services to such an extent that it becomes transparent and serves the interest of the public rather than being converted to fiefdoms of self-serving agencies for those in government. So we need more of action and less of words at this critical time in our developmental history.
Perhaps also we might get Mr. Oshinaga's take on this. The president talked about poverty in all its manifestations remaining one of the greatest challenges facing our world, and went ahead to list some of the programs that he has done or that is coming through, and also the focus on youth and women empowerment. But when you look at youth unemployment record having worsened, looking at Nigeria, the status of the world's poverty capital, under this administration, it appears, or rather it shows that the efforts of government in the last 4 years in addressing the situation is far from adequate. Mr. Oshinaga, Dr. Oshinaga.
I think it was right for the president to highlight some of the efforts of the government in addressing those issues. Well, you may say they've not done enough, or we haven't seen a radical departure from change in the status of youth and women. But you must admit the fact that this government in the last 4 years has rolled out programs. The SIP that the president mentioned, you and I here, that we know that there are various government programs addressing those needs of the youth and women. Trader money is one, Jeep is another, school feeding. I mean, so these are programs that have been effective. Maybe they're not satisfactory yet, but don't forget where we're coming from. Don't forget 16 years of waste. Don't forget that we were in a depression. Don't forget that things were so bad before this government came in, and so you don't expect the rebuilding to be as fast as in the normal circumstances. But this government has tried in the last 4 years to help the youth, to help the women, and in these next 4 years, I can guarantee you that they'll be far more effective than they were in the past.
Mr. Dahiru, would you like to respond to that?
Yeah, you know, the resort to blaming the past 16 years for the flaws of this government is becoming a narrative that is becoming very stale. Because PDP is not an alphabet, PDP. PDP is composed of people who I'll tell you that most of the people in the PDP in the last 60 years that are accused of destroying Nigeria are today in charge of the ruling party at almost every level and arms of government. So in essence, what the APC blames the PDP for its failures in the last 4 years on the 16-year rule, they're actually blaming their own members who are now in charge of the party. Look at the rank and file of the party. Apart from the president himself, from the vice president down, they are either PDP members or active collaborators of PDP in their so-called 16 years of misrule. So I think we should jettison this narrative of PDP misrule and begin to look at what is wrong with our nation holistically, devoid of any partisan coloration. Elections are over. We must look at the facts and separate it from fictions. This government has not been able to fulfill any of its change promises because of a simple failure of leadership, arising from lack of proper understanding of issues at stake before taking on the reins of power. They love to refer to 60 years of PDP. Let us look at the first 8 years of the PDP. Leveraging on $17 per barrel of crude oil that didn't go beyond $67 in 2007. The Obasanjo Atiku administration was able to offset Nigeria's external debt, increase minimum wage twice, created an excess crude account of $35 billion, raised foreign reserves to $43 billion, leveraging on only, I repeat, $17 per barrel of crude oil and $67 at peak. So it is not an excuse for this government to continue to push back its failure on the past. They have to sit down, get all hands on deck, unite the country primarily around a pan-Nigerian agenda for socio-economic development. And then the president must have a vision to drive this process.
Let's get the final 30 seconds.
Nigeria will not...
Your final 30 seconds from Dr. Oshinaga, because you've mentioned a number of issues there, Mr. Dahiru. Dr. Oshinaga, 30 seconds, please.
Well, let me just say that nobody is blaming 16 years as a primary thing to deflect the responsibility of this government. We're just saying that coming from where we're coming from, it is a miracle that we're here. And I've kept saying this over time, that if Buhari did not win in 2015, Nigeria would have become a Venezuela. So let's understand the fact that it's a rebuilding process, and it takes time, it takes effort, and I have no doubt that this president is doing all he can to put Nigeria where it should be.
Rebuilding process, Dr. Oshinaga, and Mr. Dahiru says all hands must be on deck. Well, thank you both gentlemen for joining us on the program. That's how we wrap things up on the show. Thank you for watching. I'm Millicent Nwaka.